How's it going, guys? My name is Kyle, and today we're going to change the oil on my 2019 Toyota Tundra. This procedure applies to the Toyota Sequoia, the Toyota Land Cruiser, model years 2008 all the way up to 2021. Not a lot of changes in the engine configuration for those years, so this should be pretty straightforward. I typically try and change the oil every 5,000 miles, check filters, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully this video is helpful for you, and we'll keep it simple and get started. So starting underneath the truck, there are 3 screws that we need to take out of the front valence. It's a 10mm bolt, and I'm using just a 12-volt impact driver to take these off just to make it a little faster. So we're going to start with that. Next, we're going to move on to the skid plate, which there are 5 bolts for. They are a 12mm bolt. Now for the oil draining, I cut off a 5-gallon bucket that fits underneath. It just is easier for me to do it this way. That way I can just pull it out. I store my used oil in a 5-gallon bucket before I take it to the recycling center. It works better than the alternative oil catch pans. Less spillage because it only comes up the oil. This thing holds about 8 quarts and it comes up to maybe halfway on this. So I got plenty of room. I don't have to worry about the overfill on when I drain it. So. And if you're like me, you'll drop the bolt inside the bucket, and we'll fish that out at when we get that done. Now that we got that draining, it's almost there. We're going to use a good strong light here. I love these. If you haven't used them before, I love these O-lights. Just a little handheld magnetic light. I love that it's got a magnet here on the back, so it sticks. It's super handy for jobs like this. But anyways, we're going to take a light and just kind of go through here, look for leaks. This thing's got about 85,000 miles, so not really expecting to see much, but we're going to kind of go through it and see what it looks like here. Drive belt looks good. Don't see any signs of water pump leaks or other coolant leaks, so that's good. Everything looks to be in order. Once your oil gets draining, again, if you're like me, you're going to clean up a little bit of extra mess, because I don't care what you do, you're liable just to get some oil somewhere. So maybe if you're a professional mechanic, which I am not, I should preface this video by telling you I'm not a professional mechanic, but I've been doing my own oil changes now on these things for a long time. So just kind of going through my tips and tricks. All right, we're about done draining here. One of the things that I wanted to point out is they do recommend that you change the oil pan plug gasket at every oil change. I typically do not. Probably every other oil change or every third oil change, just depending on what I'm finding. I mean, this gasket's fine. It's not leaking or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just reuse the old one. Moving on to the plug. As I said, when you're not a professional mechanic, you'll do dumb things and you'll drop the plug in the bucket of oil, in which case I have a magnetic little arm here to retrieve it with. So we're going to go ahead, now that that's kind of just a drip, go ahead and pull the bucket out and put my magnet around there and pick that up, which, as you can see, it's good and oily now. So we'll get that kind of cleaned up there. Slide our catch bucket out of the way, and we will wiggle up here a little bit more and put the plug in. Hand tight for right now. Again, this is a 14mm socket. We're going to snug that up just about a half turn past hand tight. So these things, you don't want to strip these out. So we're going to go ahead and put a wrench on it and just snug it up here a little bit. The next step in the process is to pop this off. This uses just a 3/8 inch ratchet head. This doesn't take much to get this done. I've already kind of loosened it up, but I'm going to go ahead and give it one more turn. And then this will just come off by hand. We're going to use this tool here this comes with the Toyota filter kit, and this just inserts into here and allows you to finish draining some of the oil out of the housing. You can see the oil that comes out. Give that just a minute to drain. Once that kind of slows to a slow drip, I'll go ahead and pull that off the rest of the way. And it does, this one, it's got a gasket in here. that we will replace. So we're going to set that off to the side. And then we're ready for the main housing to come off. I'm using a Motive brand tool here, special filter housing removal tool that we're going to use. It does have a 3/8" socket, but I've found that that has stripped out depending on the torque and everything else. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. Long story short, I use a 27mm socket, which fits on this part nicely. And now there are 3 little grooves here that we got to line up on the filter housing, and 1 on either side. And we're going to go ahead and line that up. And then I'm using, this is a half-inch drive socket. Get that put into place here and spin that off. And get it the rest of the way off. And again, you'll have some oil that comes out. So we're going to drain that off. For this part of the process, we're going to remove this filter. It just comes off. We check the function of this. This is a little spring activated deal. I am using the plastic housing, and I have actually replaced this. I've seen a lot of guys that will go to the metal housing. I've had good luck with these, with the exception of user error on my own behalf. Tell you that story, I guess, here is that I over tightened it, putting it back on, and I cracked the housing coming off, especially because I over tightened it, and then I tried to remove it while the engine was cold. And those are 2 recipes for disaster, in which case I broke the housing. I broke these ears off. I could not get the housing off. It was a mess. And now this is actually the first time I've done it since, and I see that I actually put just a little bit of anti-seize on these threads, and I just don't think that was the ticket. That's all, it's just all melted off and just wasn't the right thing to do here. Again, learn from my mistake. Do not over tighten it, and do not change your oil when the engine is cold. So this comes with new gaskets. We're going to put these in place here. And we're going to put a little bit of oil on both of these, which I spilled some. I'm using just the top of the lid for my catch basin. It's just a 5-gallon bucket lid. And this goes down. We're going to seat this down here. And there's a groove right here at the bottom, which I think you can see. There's pretty much only one place for it on here. Put that in place. This other gasket goes on the bottom part of that, followed by, make sure that's seated nicely, followed by that. We're going to go ahead and hand tighten that on, and we'll snug that up once we get it back on the truck. Very important that when we put this back, and I'll say it again when we get ready to do it, 18 foot-pounds. 18 foot-pounds is what the service manual recommends for this. Do not over tighten it. All right, so for reinstallation, we've got our new housing, everything put together. Insert this. We're going to spin this on until we get it to the hand tight position, to the point where we really can't spin it by hand anymore. Piece back on. And hard to see on camera here, but I am using a torque wrench, spec'd again at 18 foot-pounds. And if you don't, once you probably get better at this, you do not need to use a torque wrench every time. But I learned the hard way, so I'm going to use a torque wrench. And you will be surprised, 18 foot-pounds is not much. It feels like it could go tighter, but it is not much. That's 18 foot-pounds. I mean, it's barely tighter than hand tight. So again, use that as a sign of caution and learn from my mistakes. Now that that's in place, we're going to go ahead and reinsert the 3/8" and tighten this piece up. And again, this is about the same. I just got to snug that up. And that's it. That part of it is done. Now we're on the final steps of this thing. We're going to go ahead and refill the oil. The oil I'm using is 0W20, and I'm just using a Valvoline full synthetic. There are so many different, obviously, brands and opinions out there on what motor oil to use. I use, honestly, whatever's cheapest. Mobil One, Valvoline. I'm usually spending about 25 to 30 bucks for a 5-gallon or a 5-quart jug of it. So this is what I use. Use what you want. This does me fine for 5,000-mile oil changes intervals. Some guys on the internet will get all excited about some foaming or white substance that kind of forms on the inside of these caps. I don't have any of that. But that is often due to short trips, not letting the engine warm up completely. I don't have that case here. This is a highway vehicle mostly, so I'm on long hour or 2 trips every time, but you can see I'm good. Not something to worry about either way, just something to note. So I'm going to go ahead and, this thing takes about 8 quarts of oil. I'm going to go ahead and dump all 5 of this in. Moving on to our second 5-quart container. Again, I'm only going to add about 2 quarts in, just kind of eyeball it. Our dipstick is located just to the left of the coolant reservoir and just about in the halfway mark. Matter of fact, we're going to add a little bit more just to bring it up to full before we start it. Started it up. Let's go ahead and check the fluid levels again. Usually, once we've done this, it drops a little bit. Actually, we're not showing any on the dipstick, so you can see why you want to start it and then recheck it. Add here to this to get us up to the level point. We do not want to overfill it, so we're going to stop right there. We've got about 7.5 quarts in right now. Check it, and we are just a tick under full. We're going to go ahead and splash just about another 1/3 of a quart in, just since the engine is not warmed up anymore, and that should do us just fine. We'll check it after a short drive and top it off as need be, but otherwise that's pretty much wrapping the fill process up. We're going to put our cap back on, snug that up a little bit, check our filter. Going to go ahead and refill the windshield washer fluid and put our skid plate back on. All right, guys. So the biggest pain in the butt of the whole job is this skid plate. Just getting everything to line up, holding it with one hand. Maybe some guys have some tricks they can provide and drop a comment or two. But for me, it's kind of just a trial and error. Sometimes there's some cuss words. I'll do my best not to cuss, and we'll speed this process up and get it done.